Lab number 233. In this lab, we will try to get data from the backend. We will emulate the backend, and basically we'll try to display this data inside our application. This data will be a simple list of cards that we will have in our hybrid wallet. So let's start with creating the backend simulation. So for that, let's open the browser and navigate to a website called getsandbox.com. So we will use this sandbox platform to emulate our backend. So just click sign up. It's really easy. You type the details in this form and click sign up to create a free account that will allow you to send about 5,000 requests for free. So now after account creation, you can actually start creating a sandbox. We will go with blank one, and you can type any name that is free. I will type something like hybrid wallet. And what this service does is basically allowing us to call some kind of URL. In our case, in my particular station, it will be this hybridwallet.getsandbox.com then /hello with method get, and I will get this reply. I will show you how it works. So I'm typing the route hello, and using REST API actually gives me a reply hello world. So what we will do, we will change this default behavior to our backend simulation. For that, first of all, open on your host machine or in the browser folder lab233 files inside lab files folder, and find the file called cards.json. So you need to open it with the text editor, copy everything that is inside. It's our card reply that we should receive from a server. And ideally we should pass it in some text editor, pretty smart one like Atom. Just pass it in empty file, select all lines and then go to Edit, Lines, Join Lines. This will allow us to create one line to join all the lines in one single line. So let's copy this reply and go back to our backend simulation. So here let's create a variable, something like fake response. And here we'll have something like JSON parse to parse our JSON text, and inside this JSON parse we can actually pass the joined lines that we just copied, just like that. So now instead of sending this hello world, let's actually send this variable fake response, just like that. The pass, let's change that to something like get cards. Method will stay get, and click update. So now when we are changing this URL to what we actually just named it, get cards with uppercase, we should be able to see the server response with details that we got from there. Now when our backend simulation is ready, we will go back to our text editor and open the terminal using the packages term, open it in bottom pane, and create our first adapter. To do that, let's firstly navigate to hybrid wallet server. This is the server side entity, and here we will do mfp.adapter and click enter. We will need to call this adapter somehow, and let it be something like wallet adapter. Type of adapter will be HTTP. Navigation is done using the arrows, and then click enter to select the proper one. We don't need JSON store procedures for now, so select no, and we don't need USSD enablement for now, select also no. Now we have our adapter. What this means is that inside hybrid wallet server folder, inside adapters folder, we should have the wallet adapter folder, which has predefined 3 files. This is the demo content, demo files that we got. Filtered XSL is needed for transforming XML reply into the JSON, for example. We don't need it, so we can simply remove that right away. XML file actually explains the way how we will connect to a proper server. So in our case, we need to replace the domain. We will need to leave the protocol and port the same one, just replace the domain. Our domain, in my case, is this one. In your case, the URL is different. So as you remember, just go and get this URL that will be displayed here on Sandbox URL and pass it here without the protocol details. Now it's time to define a procedure, so let's call it the same way, get cards. We will need only one for now, so it's enough to leave one procedure, just get cards. And inside the JavaScript file, wallet adapter input.js, we should have actually the code that will explain how to get those cards. So here we can remove everything except this function getFeed that we will modify to our needs, so everything else can be just removed. So basically we don't need here pass, and we are not passing for now any parameters to this getFeed. So what we need is to actually create a pass that we will be calling here, and our pass is just, as you remember, get cards with uppercase. The returned content type is JSON, and method remains get. So basically what we will receive after modifying this is when somebody will call this getFeed, he will go to this get cards and will receive in the back everything we received from this invocation of that URL. Basically that's it. We can save our adapter. I can come back to a server and type mfp start to start my server. If your server is already running, you can ignore this step. But for me, there is a need to wait until the server will be started. So my server started, but deploy process failed, and this is normal because I forgot to rename my function. So it should be get cards. And now I can save this and type mfp push to actually deploy my adapter to a server. So now our adapter has been deployed, and we basically, before doing anything with the client side, we need to test that it's working. We can do that by typing mfp invoke. So because we now have only one adapter, it's actually not asking us about what adapter we want to invoke, and the same reason for procedure, we have only one. We don't need any parameters, so we can simply press enter, and it will try to invoke this server-side emulation that we created. In response, as you can see, we received the result, and our result actually just the same as we expected. We have these cards, and inside we have 4 cards that we defined as the backend emulation. So now when we are sure that the backend is actually working, we can try to do the same from a client side, from our application, and display the data inside the app. So we can go back to our hybrid wallet Cordova project inside www GS folder, and we will start the modifications with app.js file. So here what we need to change is, first of all, the name. So we have this starter as the name of the module, and everything like controller services, we are starting with this starter name. So we'll replace it with something like app, which will be more appropriate. We'll need to do the same manipulations for controllers and services right here. So the next thing that we will need to do is save this file and open the controller.js. Replace the name here for app controllers, and do the same for services, app services. And final thing is go to index and replace the name of ng-app here from starter to app, like that. Now let's go back to app.js, and we will rename tab dash, which is the first page, the first tab that we have, to tab cards. And respectively to that, we will rename also replace the URL to cards instead of dash, and the name of the view, it will be tab cards. The name of the template, the same, tab cards, and the name of the controller, it also will be cards controller, just like that. Because we renamed these values, we also need to change the default road down there, because by default, as you can see, we have road provider to pointed to tab dash, so we need to change it to tab cards, and we need to change also the file names. So first of all, we need to rename tab dash here to tab cards, just like that. And then we need to open a tabs HTML page that actually shows the logic of these tabs, and rename the view to cards, and change the URL that we're using to navigate to these cards to tab cards, just like that. Now finally all the manipulations with renaming are done, so we don't need to rename anything else. And we can go back to controller and basically instead of this dash controller that we had, create the cards controller and add the logic to call the adapter. Basically, there are two options. The first option is to do a call right here using work-light resource request. The second option, which is much better, is to create a service, a separate service that will do a request, and here in cards we will just call that service. So this will be the way that we will follow. So let's go to services.js. As you can see, we already have here some factory, and we won't touch it for now because we will need it in the future. So what we will do is we will add one more thing. We'll add a service here. Let's add it at the bottom. So I will need to remove this dot with comma and add a service. It will look like this service. Then we need to provide the name of this service. In our case, let it called cards service. I think it's proper name. And inside we will have just a function. And let's call that function something like request, or yeah, request cards. This will be okay. And basically, when somebody will request those cards, we will need to reply with the reply from our adapter. So for that, we will use work-light resource request. Let's create a variable something like cards request. This will be equal to our work-light resource request. And here we will need to provide the parameters. So first one should be the URL. It should look like this. First is the adapters. Make sure you're adding S at the end because adapter won't work. So because this is the REST API, the next one is the name of adapter, and here we should have our name. So as you remember, we called this adapter the wallet adapter. So here we should enter this name, wallet adapter. And the last one is the name of a procedure that we are trying to call. In our case, it's get cards, just like that. And we also need to provide the methods. So in our case, we will be using get methods. Well, resource without dot, sorry. Get, just like that. That's basically all that we need in terms of parameters for this request. So next thing for us is to specify the query parameters. Even if they are empty, we still need it. So it will be looking like this: cards request. Then we need to set query parameters equal to something like params, and then the empty structure, we can add quotes here. And finally, now it's time to make the call. So this call result will return to the request of this request cards function. So I will right away type return, then we will do our card requests. So here we have card request. We will send this call using the send. And we also need to create some kind of callback, what will happen in order to assign our results. So here I will have a simple function for them, and everything we kind of received in the result, we will assign to what we will return, and right away I will cut a bit results because, as you remember, we have here quite a big response. So in order not to include everything, we will just return the response JSON, which is the standard structure that we are getting from JSON content contact that we invoked from a backend side. So here we will have return result and filter it for response JSON, just like that. We can save our services here and go back to controllers. So here in cards controllers, we'll need to call this request that we created inside service, but the trick is that we cannot call it until we are sure that worklight libraries are loaded. Because otherwise we basically will get something like worklight is undefined or something like that, because here we are using the worklight resource request and we won't able to use it until the framework initialization will be done. So one of the options how to check that is actually to add some code in our index.js file. So here, after we will do a common init, we can add some kind of event and dispatch these events that we will be able to listen in the controllers, for example. But I will go in even further. I will dispatch this event only in case we connect it to a server, because otherwise, I mean, if server connection failed, we don't need to request any resource. It doesn't make sense. So here inside Real Client Connect, we will add several callbacks, actually two, on success and on failure. So in case it will be a success, here we can actually code this event dispatching, but first let's try with something like simple login. So we'll log that we successfully connected to MobileFirst Platform server, and in order to see that, I will create some marks, something like that, connected to MFP server, just like this. So once we connect it, now we can create the custom events. So it will look like this. We need to create a variable, let's call it worklight events, something like this, and here we will need to create a custom event. Make sure you're using the proper uppercase and lowercase constructions. So custom event, and well, let's call it something like server connected, like this. And next thing what we need to do is to dispatch this event. Document dispatch event equal to the value of our event. In our case, is this events variable name. Let's also add logging here before dispatching that we are dispatching the event. Like that. And we also need a second callback on failure. So here we will just do a login, something like failed to connect. Now we can go back to our controllers, and here inside cards controller to listen for this event. So almost the same way, but we need to listen for that using document adds events listener. And basically what we need to provide inside is the name of the event. In our case, it's server connected, as you remember. We also need to provide the function that we need to call when this event is actually dispatched. I mean, someone fired it and we cached that. So instead of providing some simple code, we will just call a specific function. Let's call it something like init. Let's call it init complete, something like that. And basically that's it. So just add false at the end, and next thing we need to do is to create this function. So let's use the standard JavaScript for that rather than Angular. So we will have this function init complete. We don't have any parameters for this function. And inside we will add a simple login, something like init completed, and let's type worklight just before that, worklight init completed, and now we can request our service to get actually the real data from our backend emulation. So what we will do here is just load some kind of function. I mean, just call some kind of function. Let's call it something like load cards. And basically, we will just call it here, and we will define this function just before this init complete. So the name is the same, load cards. Because our service call is actually async because of backend, we will need to actually maintain response somehow with the promise. So let's create a variable, something like data request, for example, and assign it to result of our cards service request cards result. Just like that, and basically we will have a callback. So when this data request completed, what we will do afterwards, after successful completion, is we will assign the result that we get from it to something like scope cards. So here inside our result, we should point actually to repeatable cards list. So it will be called cards. So the total construction would look like result.cards. And we will need to apply changes to scope, of course. Scope apply will be the proper function. Otherwise, we just won't see the result updates. Because of caching and because of inappropriate manipulations with DOM. So last thing before we can actually go is here we will need to add a reference to our service. So it's called card service. Without this reference, this call actually won't work. And let's add one more login, just almost the same as we got inside init complete, and this will be just something like called load cards. We can also log the result that we got from a server side, something like cards loaded, and the cards itself. So now we can go back to our terminal, navigate back to level up, and then inside the Cordova project, hybrid wallet Cordova, and type mfp push to push our application, the changes that we've done to a server. So now our app is deployed on the server. We can actually skip this text, this mfp push if we are doing a preview with the command something like mfp preview because during the preview we will also do a push. If we already have opened app in the browser, maybe it's even faster to do MFP push and just refresh the browser than do a preview, but it's up to you. So I will type MFP preview and select browser previewing to view my app just in a simple browser. So this is the app that we got. We didn't make any changes to UI, so we are not seeing anything on our tab cards, but we should able to see the response in our console. So let's open it using the inspect element tab. We'll go to the console and start from the beginning. So Cordova error is okay because we are not running on a real device. Same for authentication. I mean, we are not authorized, and this is okay because we didn't enable any authorization yet. So basically, as you can see, we connected to MobileFirst Platform server, then we dispatched the events from index.js, and then we got this event inside the controller, so we called the load cards, then request went to server, and basically we got a reply that cards are loaded, and inside we have these 4 objects with our cards. So basically, the last thing that we need to do here is to update our UI to display those cards. So for that, let's go back to our editor and open top cards page. So here we don't need actually everything that is inside this ion content. We can remove and we can also rename the title, something like cards should be the good one. So inside, just for now, let's create a simple list. Actually, instead of writing it manually, we can go back to a browser, navigate to Ionic Framework documentation, and check one of them examples for lists. So they are located under CSS list. Yeah, and we can copy something like that and pass it inside our app. So here inside our list we should have repeatable item. We will repeat it using Angular ng repeat. And so what we will repeat, actually we will repeat something like card and cards, so all items inside our cards array. And each specific can be accessed using this card reference. So it should look like this card, and then name of the value that we are trying to get. As you remember from our tests, inside our array we have CN, which is the card number, date, ID, and name, which represents the name of the card holder. So let's just display the name, for example. The proper value is name. So card.name should be a proper construction here. Now we can save this and type mfp push in the terminal to actually push the changes to a server. Okay, now we can go back and refresh our application. Let's, by the way, enable emulation of mobile device display. It will be better to preview our app in UI that is prepared for mobile rather than the web version. And now we can refresh the page. So as you can see, we actually got result. 3 card holders is Annie Hamilton, and then we also have Carmen Hamilton, probably the daughter or something like that. We'll define it later. So basically that's it. On this step, our lab number 243 is finished. We got reply from backend. We displayed it within the app. So we continue development of this mobile application in next labs. Thank you.